Welcome on in to Rivalry Week, one of the best weekends of the year in college football. Also, kind of one of the saddest because it's the last full slate in college football every year. But you know what? It's pretty juicy this year. We have the renewal of Texas and Texas A&M. Michigan, Ohio State, not maybe on the marquee, but it's going to be juicy because Ohio State actually needs to beat Michigan. That's a big deal with them. You have the regular shenanigans of the Egg Bowl, the Iron Bowl, you name it. And then, of course, as we saw last week, these things like to figure themselves out in college football. Will it figure itself out even more? Is there another upset, maybe two brewing in college football this week to make the playoff picture either clearer or a little more chaotic? Because there's a chance it could be more chaotic if another upset happens. Let's start with the rankings. Ryan Beef Coyle, Mark Henry Jr., Joe Tanzi, all here with you to break down Week 14, more affectionately known as Rivalry Week. You guys have any major takeaways from the playoff rankings?
Mine was when I was talking with Brace yesterday, mine kind of is Georgia and does like a third loss potentially in the SEC title game get used against them. I was expecting Georgia to maybe be like 6 or 7. I still think when you're in like that 8-9 game, are you 100% in? I think that's been one of the main things I've been curious about this season, whether or not a team that gets to the SEC title game or the Big Ten title game, and if they have 2 losses and if they pick up a third, is that used against them or is that kind of just pushed to the side because they're playing an extra game than everyone? But with Georgia sitting there at the 8 spot, if they lose in the SEC title game, would they be out? And that would be a major talking point if a one-loss Indiana or a one-loss Notre Dame or one-loss Penn State with not as many quality wins for sure as Georgia got in over them, and Georgia just was out because they had 3 losses. That's something that I'm going to be definitely keeping my eye on over the next week as they go, because they're already penciled into the title game there.
I don't think that Sankey will let a 2-loss SEC team that loses in the SEC title game get penalized for it. I think that they'll be fine. And that's kind of my big takeaway from it's less about the rankings and more from last weekend. It's just the amount. We thought that there was, 12 chairs for 16 people. And now we're like, there's 12 chairs for like 11 people. Like you kind of have to stretch whoever you're going to make that last team to be. I think let's say, I don't want to give too many hypotheticals, but let's say that the favored results happen this weekend. And I'm sure that there's 1 or 2 that won't be that way, but let's say the favored results happen. They did put themselves in a little bit of an Alabama corner where Clemson is put at 12 here. Clemson plays South Carolina. And if SMU and Miami holds, I don't know if either of them are safe this weekend, but if SMU and Miami both win and that's the ACC title game and Clemson's left out sitting there at 10-2, beating a South Carolina team who they have sitting at 15, the committee can't bump Bama beating Auburn above Clemson if Clemson wins this week. So that's where it's Clemson. Bama's a huge Clemson fan or a huge South Carolina fan beating Clemson because they have that head-to-head against South Carolina. They'll be, if it's between the 3-loss SEC teams, Bama gets in. But I'm actually surprised they dropped them below Clemson because that's where they put them in a little bit of a weird spot where I think we were all expecting, 3 losses, but we can't count Bama out, and you can't. But they can't jump them in front of some of these teams who aren't going to play.
I think they can do whatever the hell they want. That's what I kind of look at it. I look at it as I see Bama sitting there at number 13, and they've got full license now to jump them. Whatever justification they want to use. I mean, look, these rankings are what we're basing everything off of what we assume the committee is going to do, right? So you're right in everything you're saying about Clemson. But what if there's a situation where the committee just says, you know what, that was last week. This week we feel different about Alabama. And looking at the entire kind of who are the 12 best teams to get into the playoff, you could make a case that Alabama is that over Clemson, right? I mean, like, what has Clemson really done to woo you? But to your point, Alabama should have been over Clemson in the first place.
And you're on mute, Mark.
I
Mark,
think I
you're on
muted
mute.
myself there. I don't know what happened. But Bama, they could, if they were going to make that case, I think they had to make it this week before dropping them behind. They can't put 13 above 12 if 12 beats 15. That's kind of the issue. I think where it becomes interesting is that ACC title game loser. And by the way, we'll get to it. I think Clemson loses this week, so I actually don't think that's gonna be a big factor in this whole race. But just wanted to point that out because they're sitting there at 12. Let's say Clemson wins. The big thing that's going to be an interesting kind of debate is, let's say Miami beats SMU in the ACC title game. You have two teams that you can take out of 11-2 SMU, 10-2 Clemson, and 9-3 Bama. That's where, if you have two of the ACC teams, I could see you kind of making the case, well, SMU just lost in the ACC title game. They didn't play a good schedule before they got there. That's the team that I think is the most in danger right now. It's whoever loses that ACC title game. I think the more fun conversation is who can withstand a loss. You said Ohio State, if they lost to Michigan, it would matter. Would it?
They still have to play Oregon. Well, they wouldn't have to play Oregon.
Yeah. Would Penn State go in that situation or Indiana?
I think it's Indiana. I could be wrong. I thought I saw something saying that it was Indiana.
Because both losses for Indiana and Penn State are against Ohio State.
But
so that's where you really start to get into the nitty gritty and the weeds there.
And if you want a Homer question here, and I've been the one putting my hand up saying I don't know why Notre Dame's probably in.
It's Penn State then Indiana. That's the
okay, it's Penn State. Okay,
so Penn State's in with a win and Ohio State loss. Indiana needs a win and both to lose.
Okay. So with Notre Dame, who's sitting there at number 5, I was hoping, the committee put Army at 19. I was hoping maybe that would be enough to jump Penn State, but it looks like the committee is like, well, we kind of had to put Army there. We don't think they're actually any good. But is there a case that if Notre Dame loses a close game at USC that they still get in? I can't believe I'm even asking that question. But does, a 10-2 Clemson get in over a 10-2 Notre Dame with a win over Texas A&M?
I think the question is, and it's not just for Notre Dame, what's the cushion for teams 2 through 6?
Yeah, that's kind of, I think, the most interesting debate right now.
Because the cushion for Indiana, now they were helped out a lot by Bama and Ole Miss losing, but the cushion for Indiana was number 10. So I would have to think those teams are in because they would still only be 2 lost teams, right? I think that's, I guess, maybe the way that the committee deciphers it all. But if you look at the opponents these teams are playing, though, Texas can withstand it because they're playing A&M. I think and they're an SEC team. I think they're safe regardless. Penn State's not losing to Maryland.
No.
So we don't have to worry about that. They're in. Miami, look, Syracuse is frisky. Syracuse is 100% frisky in this game. Miami could absolutely take the foot off the pedal here.
I think that's where the line is. The line is either above or below Notre Dame. Like I don't think Miami can get in with a loss to Syracuse. Regardless,
no, I don't think so.
And they'll be kicked out of the ACC title game. They'll just say SMU and Clemson are the only teams we're looking at in the ACC. So I do think that's where the line is. I think Georgia can lose in the SEC title game. Obviously, Tennessee can't lose to Vandy. So that's obviously where it stops there. But I do think there's a debate, and it just comes down to how much recency bias plays in for the committee with Notre Dame. I think there's a chance Notre Dame could lose to USC and still get in. And I would be the first person to tell you that I don't know if they deserve to, if that would be the case. But if you compare the resume of Clemson and Notre Dame, if Notre Dame were to lose, Notre Dame probably has the best win out of that with Texas A&M. They might finish 8-4 now. Who knows? But it's up for debate at least. That would be an interesting debate.
I think the wildest thing is too. I think since the rankings started coming out, you've had Oregon, you've had Texas, and you've had Miami all in there in the bye spots. We could get to next weekend, and all 3 of those teams could lose potentially in the title game, and they could all be out of the bye completely. You could have Ohio State, you could have SMU, and you could have Georgia in the bye game. So it's week to week. It's nice to talk about with the bracket and the rankings coming out. But those three teams could all be right out of that spot pretty easily. I think we could all see a scenario where they all potentially lose in their conference title games.
Well,
It all
does a
figures
team?
itself out.
Would you rather be the 1 or the 5 seed? That's
Right.
kind of the interesting thing with this whole
Yeah.
Ohio State Oregon thing. And I guess another question: if Ohio State goes and loses a close Big Ten title game to Oregon, are they sitting at the 5 seed still? Because are you going to have Penn State at 11-1 jump 11-2 Ohio State when Ohio State beat Penn State in their house? Are you going to have Notre Dame if they were 11-1 jump?
Notre Dame could.
They can't have Notre Dame jump. Well, but it's hard to do that after you put Penn State above Notre Dame this week.
Right.
That's where
they have Ohio State already at 2. They've had Ohio State pretty much at number 2 right there behind Oregon this whole time as well. So kind of just goes to show you what the committee thinks of Ohio State. But
what if Ohio State loses a blowout to Oregon? What
if it's a blowout, then they'll
get blowout, then they'll get dropped.
Because I think that's the more intriguing question is we know they can play them close. They've played them close already. But what happens if Oregon, who's kind of just been sitting there, right? Sitting there at number 1, kind of minding their own business, beating teams they should beat. What happens if they just go into Indianapolis, beat Ohio State by 30?
I don't think
it will, but
yeah.
Or what if the other way around happens?
The other way around, I still think Oregon would get the bet. I think Oregon would be fine. I think Oregon could lose the Big Ten title game by 40, and they would probably drop to like 2. As weird as that is, just because they beat Ohio State, and Ohio State would then be 1. I think that Oregon would be fine. That's like probably what the Big Ten wants more than anything. The Big Ten
beat Boise State, which might be your 4 seed.
Exactly. And Arizona State, which might be your 12, or Iowa State. Shout out Nick McClay. But I think that there's a good chance that the Big Ten is like dying to have Ohio State win a close game against Oregon. You put Ohio State as the 1 seed, and you put Oregon as the 5 seed, and you hope, they'll face each other in the Final Four. But it's definitely interesting, the whole the cushion conversation with some of these teams.
The one thing though, I will say though, we absolutely cannot have Big Ten versus Big Ten, SEC versus SEC in the first round. It defeats the entire purpose of a 12-team playoff. Like you can maneuver it. I really don't care if between Georgia and Tennessee, who's where, as long as they don't play each other in like an 8-9 game. Like that part infuriates me. Because
there's going to be 2 ACC teams, so there'll be an ACC auto bid, most likely. Most likely, the ACC is getting at least 2 teams in. So let's say there's an ACC team and there's Notre Dame. That gives you 2 out of 4 that can't be Big Ten or SEC.
And the Big 12 champ.
So, they'll probably either – and, you're right. That they could be the 12 now that I'm saying that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're right. You're actually – that's probably 3 of them right there that take care of each other. It might only take like 1 tweak, just bumping – Tennessee for Indiana, 1 spot or whatever the case may be.
The order of Penn State, Indiana, Georgia, Tennessee won't matter as much to me if they can make it SEC versus Big Ten in like those 4 teams, if it plays out that way.
I agree. The interesting thing is I saw people complaining that it can't be this way because Ohio State and Oregon are clearly the 2 best teams in the country, which I don't know if we know that to be the case. I think we can assume that, but I don't know if that's true, but they probably won't be able to face each other in the national championship because of how it's going to play out. It's probably going to be 1 is the 1 seed and 1's the 5 seed. So they would match up in the semifinals or the quarterfinals, however that breaks out. But it's how many before we kind of move on to this week, how many teams do you guys think can win the title right now?
4.
I have 4 too. I think we probably will have a different 4th team.
Who are your 4?
My 4 are, I think we're all going to say Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia. Am I wrong? And then I would go Tennessee. I do think Tennessee has the defense in the running game. Nico's the big question mark there, obviously. And there's reasons to be kind of questioning that offense and not the offense, the passing game. But you look at what Dylan Sampson, he's probably the 2nd best running back in the country potentially, and the defense is top 5 in the country. I think they can ground and pound their way to a nice little run. They would be the 4th team by a wide margin. I snagged them at 50-1. as Ole Miss was losing in the final minutes there. That's all the way down to 20-1. So I'm pretty hyped up on the Volunteers right now. I can't see anybody else.
I have those 4 as well. I would throw, if we're throwing a long shot, I guess, or not one of those 4. I could see Notre Dame, just the way that they've been playing.
Oh.
We'll see this weekend what happens, but I honestly could. Mark, I've been saying it for since the Northern Illinois game.
I know you have. You both have. You both were sitting here on the show after that, and I was yelling at you like, "We're talking about the playoffs. Like, what are we joking? Like, I can't believe we're sitting here. I don't think Riley Leonard's a good enough quarterback for them.
But they've just steamrolled anything in sight. It could be the Indiana kind of factor that maybe they haven't really been playing anyone, but it's definitely been a different team, we could say, since Northern Illinois. They're in the same boat as Tennessee, though. All they got to do is win this weekend. It could be by 1, it could be by 100. Just win and get in, and then figure it out from there. Because they could get a solid draw. Like, all right, just say Texas does wind up winning the SEC and Notre Dame's in that like 7-10 game. You're telling me you're going to be scared of Notre Dame versus Texas on a neutral? Like, I'll take my chances in that game. You're one game there away from the Final Four.
I have my blue and white colored glasses on. I think Penn State needs to be included in that conversation as well. The defense is legit. Say what you want about the play calling in the Ohio State game. It was poor. There's no doubt about that. But their defense is national championship caliber.
The same defense that just gave up 25 to Minnesota?
That game was concerning to me this weekend.
Same defense. I still think with the talent they have and the experience they have at quarterback. And look, we haven't seen, at least I don't think, the full extent of the Nick Singleton, Katron Allen combination either. I think they've been saving that, and understandably so, for these last few weeks and for the playoff. I still think they're capable of doing it. So I would say Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, because they've won it recently and they have a coach. They've one of the 2 coaches who has a job still that has won a national championship. And I'll throw Texas in there as well.
That's the question I was going to ask. Yeah.
I think they're definitely part of the conversation. They've been pretty consistent all year, but then I don't know. I have my doubts about Notre Dame. I definitely have my doubts about Miami, especially with their defense. You can sell me on Tennessee's defense. I don't know if I can completely buy into a freshman quarterback winning the Natty. It's possible. It definitely can happen. But I think to me that's the knock. And then SMU's the dark horse here, guys. They figured out their quarterback situation. They put the right guy in about week 3 or 4 with Kevin Jennings. I know they played Virginia last week, but the defense is starting to look really legit too, and that's coming together. I think they're going to beat Miami and win the ACC. It's just a matter of what their matchup is. But I think SMU, I'm not ready to put them in that list of contenders yet, but they're definitely hovering around the conversation.
I don't think I wouldn't put them in that, on that tier. But I again, Texas is the interesting one where I could maybe be swayed. But I just feel like I haven't seen enough yet from.
And I still don't trust Sark in a big spot.
Yeah, that's a big spot.
You saw the Georgia game. He panicked there. I think they were getting outplayed, and he panicked and put in Arch, and it just seems like weren't able to respond to that last year in the playoff against Washington. If they get a team that is able to kind of air it out and pass the ball, I think that's where they're really susceptible. We saw that last year, especially in the playoff. But if they have to go up, just even if they had to play like a Miami or something in the Final Four, like I would like Miami's chances in that one because of the offense. But when we were talking, who do we think can win? Miami didn't even cross my mind. But I still think Texas is a team that has some matchup issues, and Sark in big spots hasn't proven it to me. Last year was the first year he ever won 10 games, and we've seen even in the NFL situational stuff he hasn't been that great at.
And because of the way it feels like quarterback play is down. I mean, obviously you're looking at the Heisman. You have Genty, and you have I don't know why I said him first. You have Hunter, and then you have Genty before you even get to a quarterback.
But 1-2.
Yeah, and you have Dylan Gabriel's probably the best quarterback in the country. But if Oregon doesn't go win the national championship, you're kind of looking at whoever wins the Natty's gonna have. I don't know if game manager is fair to say, but like the reason I'm kind of maybe more willing to talk myself in on Tennessee this year is because you don't have a team with that elite quarterback who's just going to run through defenses. So if Tennessee can get by on that defense and that running game, like Ohio State, like I like Will Howard. I think he's actually probably one of like the 10 best quarterbacks in the country, which probably says more about the top quarterbacks, but he's not like put you on your back and win it for you. He kind of win with him guy. Quinn Ewers, I don't know what he is. It feels
like I
can
even play this weekend.
Yeah, it's weird whatever's going on there with Texas. Aller's had his bad spots in big games. Riley Leonard can't throw a 15-yard out. He's amazing at running the ball, but he's got his issues passing. Cam Ward's probably the best or second best guy in this conversation. Their defense is disqualifying. I'm not even taking them seriously. Carson Beck has been not very good. I read something about, I guess his receivers just aren't getting open at all. So if you look at his from last year having McConkey and Bowers going to this year having guys who they just don't have a good unit at all, and he's trying to make the plays happen instead of throwing it to the guys who are making the plays happen, and you're seeing him turn the ball over. Maybe he can have a nice run in the playoffs where he's developed throughout the year. They've had a brutal schedule. So maybe he's more than a game manager. Nico, you're just asking him to be a game manager, but it's like the lack of elite quarterback play really does open things up.
I'll use this as a question to kind of go into the weekend. If we're not talking about elite quarterback play, because I don't think we are, and none of these guys have NFL like superstar potential at this point, is it the best supporting cast then? Whoever has the most elite supporting cast around them. For example, Ohio State with their two running backs, Egbuka, Smith, or is it Penn State with Tyler Warren, the two running backs, receivers lacking, but
Oregon
they still have the tight end and receiver or tight end and running backs. Oregon, same thing. I think that might be the difference maker this year. Instead of just straight up quarterback play, is who is the quarterback getting the ball to? And man, if you qualify it that way, Ohio State's the runaway favorite.
Yeah.
Like that's what books have too. Books have them at plus 250 right now. I think Oregon's like plus 400.
I was going to ask you guys, because I actually, if you made me, gun to my head and make a pick right now, who's winning the Natty, I think I'm still picking Oregon. Like I'm
taking Ohio State.
I'm not, because of the way the bracket is right now. It's like, okay, Oregon, here's your gift for being the number one team, going undefeated, winning the Big Ten. You get Georgia or Tennessee on a neutral. I'm not going to like that matchup over what Ohio State has right now in their path.
I think they're most likely to be the five. Like I think Ohio State's going to be like a touchdown favorite in that a Big Ten championship against Oregon. Maybe that's a little high. Maybe it's more like a field goal. I think it'll probably be in between a field goal and a touchdown, something in that range. And so most likely Ohio State gets that one. And then if you're Oregon sitting at the 5, I guess I kind of feel like Oregon will either be the 1 or the 5. And if that's the case, I don't feel bad about betting Oregon right now. I think I saw 450 out there. So I still kind of lean with Oregon being the best team in the country, even though Ohio State is probably slightly better supporting cast, but Oregon's got NFL. I was about to say NBA guys, NFL guys all over the field, and you got two guys at receiver. I think they have the most underrated player in the country with James at running back. He feels like no one even talks about him when they bring Oregon up, and they've got dudes on the defensive line there at Oregon. Dan Lanning's kind of brought the SEC there to them, so. I'm kind of buying all the stock on Oregon I can get. I know I'm going to end up betting them as a big dog in that Ohio State game, or not a big dog, but whatever they are in that Big Ten championship. Even though it's kind of going against what I'm saying that they'd be better off as the 5 seed. But maybe if you don't think Oregon's going to beat Ohio State, but you think they can win the Natty, you wait until after the Big Ten championship. Their odds will drop, even though they get a better seed at being a 5. But interesting stuff.
If Ohio State wins by 21, which is covering the spread this weekend, they're winning the title.
Okay.
I'll keep it at that. And the reason why I say that is, what was Ohio State's goal at the start of the year, right? Think back to the bowl game against Missouri, I believe it was. They were awful. It felt like everybody quit. They didn't have a quarterback. They were just hoping and praying to get through 60 minutes. And the big thing last year after that happened was, and after losing to Michigan, was we have to get better our goal is the national championship. Our goal is beating Michigan. Beating Penn State is great for Ohio State. Doesn't really matter much. Beating Indiana, all the talking they did after the game, Will Howard, putting out the SIG, that's fine. But Indiana doesn't matter to Ohio State. What matters is Michigan winning the Big Ten championship and winning a national championship. So if they come out and beat Michigan, regardless of what the spread says, if they beat them in the manner in which they're expected to and then some, it shows me that they've kind of turned the switch into championship mode. Because remember, a lot of these guys haven't beaten Michigan at all in their careers. So there's 3 milestones that they have this season to beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship, and win the Natty. If the game's close against Michigan, I'll be worried because Michigan, although they've improved, shouldn't be competing with Ohio State. If Ohio State wins this game by 21 plus, I think they're going on to win the title. They're completely focused, killing every goal in sight. I really do think that's the case.
Yeah, that $20 million check that those boosters wrote, they better damn cross off at least 2 out of those 3 accomplishments, or that's a failed season. But I agree. And do we want to transition into that first? Because I really like Ohio State over Michigan.
Yeah, I'm taking them with the 20.5.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've heard a few different people say it, and I'm right there with them. Like they have 3 years of built up frustration that they're able to take out at home against a much inferior Michigan team. When you look at Michigan, the defense is okay, but they're not going to be able to move the ball, I think, at all on this Ohio State offense. And the thing that annoys me the most about this rivalry, and Joe, I know you said like some of these players have never beaten Michigan. But for my entire life, pretty much, Ohio State has dominated this rivalry. They won 8 in a row before Michigan has won these last 3. Like, there's such a narrative out there right now, and I know it's because of Ryan Day, but Ohio State has dominated this rivalry since the 2000s, pretty much, and the early 2000s. And since then, this has been Ohio State's rivalry. Michigan's got them the past 3 years. But even like last year, Kyle McCord had a shot at the end of the game. It's not like they've been dog walking them up and down the field. Ohio State does need to get this done, does need to break through, and a little bit of a monkey off Ryan Day's shoulder. But I think that they win this one, and they win this one big, and kind of dispel this narrative, because I'm going to take Ohio State as a football program over Michigan in terms of their kind of long-term success.
I'm taking them team touchdowns as well over 3.5. I really do think they're going to be out to make a statement. I think they're scoring 35 to 40 points very easily.
Yeah, I don't have a bet on this one. I would lean Ohio State. It's just a lot of points. I saw, I think, like, I don't know if it was an old line from earlier in the year. I saw it was 15.5, but I was like, oh, I'll definitely take 15.5. And I feel like that almost like poisoned me once I saw the number was actually 20.5. I was like, well, it's a little higher than what I was thinking initially. But so I'm laying off of it, but there's no way anyone should bet Michigan.
No, I think this is an Ohio State bet and an Ohio State bet only. Speaking of rivalries, this one hasn't happened in 13 years. Texas and Texas A&M. Now, you want to talk about rivalry week. Back in the day, back in my day when we had 5 major conferences and things were right, Texas and Texas A&M was the rivalry Thanksgiving weekend. It was the game to pay attention to. There is a lot of pent-up hate in that rivalry. It's a 5-point spread right now with Texas over under 49. A lot of questions about Quinn Ewers' ankle. A&M's defense has been atrocious in the last few weeks, which is kind of ironic because Mike Elko is a defensive guy. How are you going to look at this game knowing that there's a potential game-changing injury hanging over it?
Yeah, the major kind of point of emphasis, I would say, in this game is A&M's defense hasn't been playing great in recent weeks, but still they have the talent and the forces up front on the defensive line. And when we saw Texas at their worst this year, what did Georgia do? They wrecked the game at the line of scrimmage. So I think that if Texas A&M is able to kind of correct themselves this week and get back to what we've seen them at points this season, that they could definitely win this game outright. And I feel like the entire season, all we've talked about is, oh, this is going to be such a raucous environment. This is the first time this rivalry's happened in 13 years, the whole 9 yards. Well, if we're going to talk about that all year, I think we have to handicap that into the game as well. And Texas A&M, even after losing last week, like if they lost last week, I could have seen a little bit of a letdown effect in this one. if the loss last week had eliminated them, Texas A&M is still a win away from going to the SEC title game. They still have plenty to play for. So I like Texas A&M to win this one. I think they're going to win this one outright. I think it's a spot where we see Sark do a Sark and piss down his leg in a big moment, and Texas A&M wins in a pretty chaotic one. I'm really excited for this one because it's a rivalry game that I'm not that familiar with and haven't experienced much about.
I was gonna say Friday in Thanksgiving weekend is Nebraska, Colorado. It's Texas A&M. It's the Egg Bowl, which, by the way, should end up being right on Thursday night. But some of these old school rivalries are just non-existent anymore, and so it's going to be fun to see like a new generation of college football fan get into Texas A&M.
I love the over here. I'm going with the over at 48.5. Texas A&M's defense, like you guys said, has not been very good lately. 5 of the last 6 games have went over for the Aggies, 7 of the last 9. 48.5, pretty low number. You look at what Texas A&M, I mean, the defense hasn't been good, but you look at what their offense has done since Marcel Reed. I think he's been in and out a couple times in the lineup, but since he really came on the scene against LSU, 38 against LSU, 34 on the road against Mississippi State, 41 against Missouri, only 20 against South Carolina, but since then 38 and 40 and 41 last week against Auburn, even in a tough loss. But their offense has showed up for most of this stretch. And even if this is a Texas win, I think the A&M offense will still show up. The question mark is the Texas offense, but with Texas A&M's defense not being that good, I don't see them, getting shut down either. So I think 48.5. I actually thought this number would be mid to upper 50s, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know which way I'm going to end up going. I think the Ewers injury is a big deal. I'm not saying Arch Manning can't get the job done, but that would be a pretty treacherous environment for him to go into. But what a story that would be, right? If Arch has to play, we'll see what happens in that one. One thing I know,
Arch Heisman. Remember that talk? Imagine he wins these next 2 games. People will be calling for it.
One thing I do know is South Carolina, Clemson is going to be incredibly close. The spread's 2.5 indicates that South Carolina's played some incredible football, and to be where they are in the SEC, it really speaks volumes to what they've built. Clemson, look, they're at number 12, but does anybody think they're good? Because the last time we tried to hype Clemson up, they lose to Louisville, and pretty handily in that regard. So I have trust issues here with Clemson. I think the best unit on the field, though, is South Carolina's defense, which kind of leads me towards the under.
I think this game is one of the great reasons of the 12-team playoff, because this would just be like a good game on during a 14 playoff year. But this game actually has legit meaning. Like, there's going to need to be over-the-wall chaos for South Carolina, I think, to get in with the teams that they've lost to. But Clemson, there's certainly a path there for them to get in. And Clemson, too, can still go to the ACC title game. So this game still means a lot. And it's a pretty cool one because it's not a rivalry that I feel like we've had both of these teams good at the same time much. No. Clemson's been really good. South Carolina down. South Carolina had a good year a couple of years ago. Clemson hasn't been that great. So it'd be cool if these two can kind of keep pace and evenly. But I like South Carolina in this one. I think if you look over the past 4 to 5 weeks, you can make an argument that South Carolina has been playing like one of the top 5 to 6 teams in the country. And that defensive line can wreck a game in themselves. Lenore Sellers has really developed over the course of the year. I think they're a team playing with sky-high confidence, and I like them to win this game. Clemson also is just a couple weeks removed from needing a long Cade Klubnik kind of heroic touchdown run just to beat Pitt. So I've never been in on this Clemson team this year. I got under 9.5 wins as well. So looking for a loss in this spot in South Carolina to get it done and maybe make an interesting resume case there.
Yeah, I'm on South Carolina as well. I think they're the better team here. And it feels like Clemson, I feel like the only reason Clemson's here is their schedule. I know that Cade Klubnik's played a lot better. Their schedule has been terrible.
Yeah.
It's just, one of the worst ACC schedules you'll see. So I think South Carolina's played a brutal schedule on the other end of things. And, a couple plays here, a couple plays there, they could be easily with 2 losses. And they'd be solidly in the playoff, but that's not where they're at. I think they have the foolishness to think that maybe they can make the playoff if they win the game. but I don't think they can get in.
Motivation's a hell of a drug. And South Carolina has plenty of that going into this weekend. Want to hit on some games that have my attention a little bit. Starting with Oklahoma State and Colorado on Friday at noon. The over-under is 65. Oklahoma State has not been able to stop a damn thing this season. And the one thing we do know is Colorado needs to win, but this might not be their this might be their last game. And Travis Hunter, it's the final statement to the Heisman voters. I think the only thing you bet in this game is the over 65 because they're going to just force feed the ball to Travis Hunter. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with 200 yards from scrimmage. I know it's noon, it's Friday, it's the day after Thanksgiving, it's a 10 a.m. start local, but Oklahoma State just hasn't been able to stop a damn thing all year. And Colorado's defense, while improved, can still be susceptible. And look, Ollie Gordon's played a little bit better over the last month. Nowhere close to the standard we held him to going into the season. But I think Colorado is going to just run up the score as much as possible in that game.
Yeah, I think this could be one of those games that it's a drive over the bridge game. You head over to Jersey and you sit in a lot in Burlington or Camden or something, and you pay the toll and you go play some Travis Hunter props because I agree. I think Dion was pissed too. Hunter didn't even get named for the finalist for the best DB award. So I think it's going to be a game where he really tries to kind of spite it to the media there. I think there's a chance, hell, with it being their last game, most likely, you can see him at kick returner and punt returner too. Like he might play just about every single snap on the football field and get him the ball in his hands as much as they can. But I agree. I like the over. And if you are in a state that you could hit some player props, look at Travis Hunter as well, because I do agree with you, Joe. It's going to be a game that they feed him till the wheels fall off pretty much.
The anti-Travis Hunter tweets are hilarious. He's a snap merchant.
Yeah.
He's winning a snap award to win the Heisman. It is pretty funny. Obviously, it's dumb, some of it, but
it's incredibly stupid. He's winning the Heisman.
I think Genty should win the Heisman. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
And I've said the entire season, by the way, I've been extremely consistent that I think Genty should win the Heisman, but that I don't think he ever had a chance being a running back from Boise.
No.
And also starting as hot as he did, it made it so that if he ever put up anything less than 200 yards,
less than 204 touchdowns.
Yeah, he set such an insanely high bar for himself. And the Travis Hunter argument was never about stats. It's about the narrative, and it's about playing both ways. And that way it's hard to ever fall off the top once you get there, because you can't really have a bad game, because if Travis Hunter doesn't do a lot receiving, you can still be like, well, he played corner and he did a good job. So it's
the only thing for him is if he would get hurt. He was able to stay healthy. That pretty much just handed him the award.
Yeah, that's what it is. I do have a little bit of a problem with it, but it's fine. It's going to happen.
Well, it's also been really bad quarterback play.
Yeah,
we mentioned earlier, this is the perfect year for a non-quarterback. 3 double-digit spreads I want to hit in Saturday's slate. All at once kind of here. Miami a 10.5-point favorite at Syracuse. SMU a 13.5-point favorite against Cal, who we've all mentioned in the last few weeks. Cal has been the most overrated team on the books. But if you look at Justin Wilcox's stats as an underdog against the spread, they're pretty damn good, and then sets up for this situation. And then Alabama in the Iron Bowl, 11.5 against Auburn. I think I may have texted you guys this. If not, I thought it a lot on Saturday night. If the Iron Bowl was being played at Jordan-Hare, I was betting Auburn money line. I still might. But there's so many flaws in the Alabama team right now. And look, it's a rivalry game. They have to win it to be alive for the playoff. But Auburn's offense is actually pretty good, and you could argue maybe they have the better individual talent with Jarquez Hunter running back. Cam Coleman at wide receiver is one of the best, least talked about freshmen in the country. At least I'm taking the over. The Iron Bowl always seems to breed chaos, but your thoughts on any of those 3 games?
Auburn's the best, worst team in the country. They're 0-3 in one-score games. You flip those, and this is like an 8-9 win team potentially. They've played better as of lately, I think, too. The confidence is looking a little bit better, but they've just given games away. Are they going to take care of the ball? If they are, they can certainly stay in this game. So I think Auburn is definitely worth a look there, especially with the letdown factor of Alabama after last weekend. Even remember last year, Auburn was terrible And what did they do? They dominated that game pretty much from start to finish. And Jalen Milroe pulled some stuff out of his ass to win that game. I also really like the over in that Miami-Syracuse game. I think if you're going to be able to challenge Miami and make that a game at all, you have to be able to go out there and throw the ball around the yard and score some points. And say what you want about Kyle McCord, but they're going to go out and throw the ball around the yard. He's about to go over 4,000 passing yards. He's got 26 passing touchdowns. So might throw a couple interceptions your way if you're Miami, but who knows? Maybe one of those goes for 6. I think we see a shootout in that one. 67.5, I think it is. Really high number, but I think that's a fun one that could be like 42-35 or something. Miami squeaks by like we've seen them do a bunch this year.
My favorite bet of the week is Cal. I'm going with Cal. I got it at 13.5. And it's Justin Wilcox as an underdog. He's 30-18-1 against the spread as an underdog, one of the best underdog coaches in the country. It's a bunch of outright wins sprinkled in there as well. A couple of outright wins as a double-digit dog sprinkled in there as well. So Cal was overvalued time after time the last couple of weeks. They're back to being undervalued. Vegas threw them in the trash after they let them down continuously. And this is exactly where Justin Wilcox and Cal show up and try to ruin SMU's season. I think they're live in this game.
Any other bets you guys have locked in for rivalry week?
This is not a rival, but if Duke covers against Wake Forest, I told Beef I'm going to be ordering a Malik Murphy Duke jersey to commemorate the magical 2024 Duke football season that nobody ever cared about. They're going to go 9-3. They're going to be 9-3 against the spread. They are, I think they're 6-1 against the spread as an underdog with 4 outright wins as a dog. They're a favorite here, but I need to commemorate the 2024 Duke football gambling season.
I got a few. Kansas -1. They're at Baylor. They've been playing really well recently. Sicko one. Sam Houston State +3 against Liberty. Sam Houston State's been like a quiet, like pretty solid team this year. And then two trend plays, going with the team that has the best record this season to the over. Do you know what that team is?
Baylor?
Nope.
Okay.
The Iowa Hawkeyes.
Wow.
9-2 to the over this year. I'm going over 39.5 against Nebraska. We'll go back to an old school game there, and that one will be like 10-7. But I'll ride a trend with that one. And then the last one, Arizona State. Best team against the spread this year, 9-2. They're playing Arizona, worst team against the spread at 2-9. I'm going to back Arizona State -9.5 in that one there. So fade away on my 2 trend plays for the weekend.
I'll say this because Beef and I mentioned it last week, and we're probably a week ahead on it. Bowl eligibility matters, especially to the group of 5 schools. These are teams that have to win. I'll just name them off really quick. App State, Auburn, Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina, Eastern Michigan, Kansas, Louisiana Monroe, Michigan State, New Mexico, NC State, North Texas, Oregon State, Virginia versus Virginia Tech for bowl eligibility. Get excited for that game. Western Michigan also playing Eastern Michigan for the right to go to a bowl, and Wisconsin. Just a scan of that. North Texas plays Temple. They're a 10.5-point favorite. I will gladly swoop that one up. And then what do we think of North Carolina? Because that's a very interesting
quit mode.
Are they in quit mode? Do you bet NC State because they have bowl eligible on the line? Like that's a little question to ask yourself. But I think other than that, I would look to Coastal. I'd look to Kansas. I mean, they're the hottest team in the Big 12. Definitely North Texas. And then Michigan State against Rutgers. There's a chance that happens. Rutgers hasn't really been great over the last few weeks. So I think about 4 or 5 of them. Choose wisely, but bowl eligibility does matter to a bunch of these programs, especially some of the ones I mentioned.
I'm on Kansas with you guys. I also like the over in that game. Baylor's been really, really good to the over since they put I think Robertson is the quarterback's name, I believe. Since they put him in, they've really been high flying offense. I like Louisville laying 3.5 against Kentucky. Kentucky's what's up?
I'm going Kentucky in that one. Kentucky always wins in that rivalry.
I think
Me too.
Louisville finally is the better team, and they've lost like 10 straight or something crazy. So I think this is where you can finally be like, let's stomp this team that kills us at the end of the year every year from the big bad SEC. When I think Mark Stoops checked out the minute he didn't get the Texas A&M job out of this season. So I think that's what happened down there. And then I'm going with Florida. Lay the points with Florida. Florida State stinks. Give me all 14.5. I'll lay them with the Gators. And then one last one. I'm sorry to Nick McClay. I'm going with K-State +3. I do think K-State is going to keep that game close. I don't get why Iowa State is like ranked above some of the other.
Somehow that's a top 25 game after the last few weeks. I don't get it.
It's insane. Yeah, I don't think Iowa State's like good. Like 31-28 against Utah. Like I was not impressed. Like they lost to Kansas by more than BYU lost to Kansas and got penalized less for it. Like they lost to a Texas Tech team that I don't think is good. I don't. They beat UCF, who's bad, by 3 points. Like I don't think Iowa State is good. So I don't want them to make the Big 12 championship. That's part of me betting on K-State here. But I do think K-State is probably just the better team that's played a little bit of a tougher schedule.
I'm taking Notre Dame too, -7.5. Mark, sorry, but
the line's scary, man.
When's the last time they didn't cover? I honestly don't
line. If they lose to USC to ruin the season, and then they get
if they lose to USC, at least next week's show is going to be pretty good.
If they lose to USC, if this season, this will be my least favorite Notre Dame season of all time over some bad Notre Dame seasons.
Fight on.
If they lose to USC, I'll get you a Riley Leonard Duke jersey to wear with your Malik Murphy.
I didn't think about that now. Duke upgraded a quarterback. That's the sad part. About that.
They did. They absolutely did.
Malik Murphy should be in South Bend next year.
Hey, he might be. You never know with the way they've been plucking ACC quarterbacks.
I'll take it. Duke to Notre Dame pipeline.
Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. For Ryan Beef Coyle, Mark Henry Jr., I am Joe Tanzi. We will be back next week with a championship weekend preview. Best of luck on your bets and eat all the turkey in the world. Good luck, everyone.